Do you believe or do you know neurodiverse people are employable? The term neurodiverse is an all-encompassing term for saying that the brain functions just a little bit differently, processes information a little bit different. Neurodiverse people, and autism, Asperger's is included in that category, are employable. We feature Dr. Matthew John Zakreski for a second episode where he discusses how we can help those who are neurodiverse gain employment. Hi there, and thank you for joining us on the Overcomers Overcoming podcast. We feature those who are in the process of overcoming or have overcome any type of life encounter, life obstacle that at the time seemed to be almost insurmountable. With this podcast, we have three objectives in mind. Our first objective is we want you to know with a confident resolve you are not alone. We want to work with you. We want you to know there are others who are working with you, who want to help you through whatever you are encountering, and together we will get through whatever you're experiencing.
Our second objective is there are multiple options for any life encounter you are facing. We want to help you develop a resolve that there are various options and solutions to any life dilemma.
Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you're encountering something that was possibly a decision you made sometime in the past, and if you had the opportunity for a life redo, you would make a different decision. We want to help you with those critical thinking skills that can help you make an informed decision and not encounter what you're going through at the moment. We are the Cooper Culture, a veteran-owned business. We work with business personnel and families to develop and sustain connected relationship cultures within their families and organizations. That type organization is one where people feel wanted, appreciated, and genuinely a part of that organization. I'm with my wife and business partner, Marty, who has helped me facilitate this podcast. Today we feature Dr. Matthew John Zakreski. We call him Dr. Matt, for a second episode where he addresses neurodiversity, an all-encompassing term for people who process information just a little different from those who are not neurodiverse. But that term encompasses autism, Asperger's, other types of brain anomalies. I'm going to use the term anomalies, such that some people believe those who are neurodiverse are not employable, and we're just uncertain how to adapt to them. It's a great episode to learn about neurodiversity and how we can work with those who are neurodiverse. Marty, what are some takeaways we can gain from Dr. Matt?
We can always gain a lot of information, and those that have, say, autistic or ADHD children and realize that they just think different, then listening to Dr. Matt can be a big help to them to help them understand. And you were talking about unemployable. Dr. Matt mentions in this podcast 2 apps, I believe, that are helpful in identifying jobs for those that have ADHD or autism.
It's a great episode to learn, an opportunity for us as we learn to adapt to these people. Let's listen and learn together. Dr. Matt, it is great to have you back with us. We had an intriguing discussion in our first episode about neurodiverse people, how to work with them, and we left off with careers, how to find the niche, what they're good at. And I think our listeners can gain a lot from that. And I'd like to pick up right there, Dr. Matt, kind of a continuation of our last episode. Dr. Matt, it's great to have you back with us.
I mean, I've been looking forward to coming back. It's, getting invited back somewhere to a podcast is always a sign you did a pretty good job, I think.
Well, thank you. Dr. Matt, for people who are neurodiverse, a very overarching term, but autistic within that spectrum and so forth, some people feel, and I've heard it said, that autistic people are likely unemployable. I personally don't believe that to be factually correct. I just choose to believe that there are talents, traits, there are things that people are good at. Just may take a little bit longer to develop that so that we see that. Doctor, you're an expert in this. Can you help us work through this?
I mean, absolutely. And yes, I mean, autism as a term covers a wide range of levels of skill and functionality. I've worked with autistic people who are profoundly, profoundly delayed, and I've worked with autistic people who are profoundly, profoundly gifted. So, to say autistic people can't be employed is like saying that American-made cars can't win a NASCAR race, right? It's missing the point. It all depends on how you set up that environment to succeed. So if we're going to talk about autistic people and employment, one of the things that we want to do is actually start that conversation well before the job even starts. So, Ron, refresh my memory. What did you do before you podcasted?
I was Air Force. I was 22 years Air Force, and I flew the F-4. I'm a Vietnam era kind of person, and at a very early age, I would have never been able to have this kind of a conversation with you, Dr. Matt, because I didn't know who I was, where I was going, or anything like that. So, to a degree, I got a delayed start.
Right. And I knew that you had served. I couldn't remember what branch. So could you imagine an autistic person doing well in the armed forces?
And I think probably yes, but okay, there is an aspect of what I think I know as executive functioning, being able to think ahead. And so it may take some training to be able to do that. Of course, that's everybody who is in aviation has to be able to think ahead. So it's a matter of training the brain, so to speak.
Absolutely. So the rigid structure and clearly delineated rules of the military, especially the Air Force, are very appealing to the autistic brain because whereas most businesses have written rules and unwritten rules, in the military, everything is written.
Yes.
Right? Your room must be this clean. You have to shave in this way. You need to be at the, is it end at 9:45? I think is that when things shut down at the Air Force Academy?
Well, yes. So.
And it's one of those things where if I'm an autistic person, that structure is very appealing to me because it tells I don't have to do a lot of that thinking for myself. I can sort of have a program run all that stuff for me and focus on stuff internally. Now, you might not think of an autistic person holding an assault rifle or throwing mortars at somebody, but not all jobs within the military hierarchy are combat, right? There's IT and medical and transport and logistics. You can be the quartermaster. You can do a million other things. So, broadening the scope of jobs within an organization, even something as hierarchical as the military, means that there are spaces and places for neurodivergent folks to work within those systems. We just need to be thoughtful about what doors we open and why.
I appreciate what you just said. And yes, structure. We're learning the structure. But let me ask you about, let's say, time. In other words, let's say we're going to set a time limit, no more than 3 hours out of a 24-hour period on a computer, iPad, cell phone, whatever electronic device there is. And we're going to leave it up to you to track that time. And at the 2 hour, 59-minute mark, you've got 1 minute remaining. I I have found that to be very unrealistic because these people frequently, my limited experience is, they can become almost addicted to, and they have no concept of, yeah, they can remember 3 hours, what you said, but it's actually where we are on that 3 hour time limit. And throughout the day, they have no concept of it.
Yeah. Well, and the problem with screens and other technology for neurodivergent people is that neurodivergent brains tend to run, all brains run on a dopamine circuit. You do something, you get a dopamine reward for doing the thing that activates your brain. You end up with a little bit more dopamine than you started with, and that excess dopamine allows you to do more things. And the cycle continues. And ideally, you're doing more things during your day that fills you up with dopamine. So you end the day feeling charged up and empowered. But for a lot of people, the things they have to do throughout the day are draining that dopamine surplus, and they end up feeling burnt out and exhausted. Now, when our brains crave dopamine, we are wired to get that dopamine in as easy a manner as possible, right? Our brains choose efficiency there, ease of action. They're going to pick the fruit that's on the ground, not the fruit that you have to climb to the top of the tree for. Well, golly, every one of us is carrying around a little phone in our pocket that lets us do all the shiny, bright things. And that's an easy dopamine get for our brain, right? The language I often use for families is, if you're driving home from work and you decide you want burgers for dinner, what's easier? Stopping at the Kroger, getting the chuck, the cheese, the pickles, the onions, the firing up the grill, getting the buns, getting the ketchup and the mustard, making the burgers, cooking the burgers, putting them together, and then eating, or going to Burger King, right? And we all know which one's easier, but then we have to remind ourselves which one's better for us.
Right.
You know? So there's no problem with using technology and screens. The idea is you've got to put limits around it. And unfortunately, our brains may not want those limits because our brain says, well, gosh, this is the dopamine. This is the thing I need. Why would I take this thing away from me if it's something that is helping me be more functional in this world? And that's when the language around like the fast food burgers versus the burgers you cook at home is helpful, because if you only ate fast food burgers, what would you look like?
No, that's true. Now let me build on that just a little bit. That some of the activities, from our perspective, can be just brain dead, wasted time. I mean, you're addicted to, there's nothing to be gained from what you're doing. Okay, I guess I can agree with you or understand it's the need for dopamine. I'm getting that through whatever it is I'm doing. But what we try to do is differentiate what is helpful. In other words, there are some people who are creative on the iPad. And yep, they actually, the amount of time that you are spending on there, you're building onto a niche area. And then it's a matter of, okay, well, let's nurture that. But yet, I'm rambling here just a little bit. I want for you to be responsible in the amount of time you spend on it, and maybe looking at the screen can be damaging to the eyes a little bit. But if you are being creative, I want to help nurture that. So if you can pick up on kind of the competing things we're working with, that's one of the things we want to try to have the right balance.
Yeah. And balance is everything, right? And, every time new technology invades society, there's a snapback to how we do with it. I mean, I remember when I got my driver's license when I was 17, I would have driven 3 houses down the block because driving is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yes, I can drive. That gives my brain a lot of dopamine. Whereas like, it's probably actually more efficient to walk 3 houses down, right? I'm not going to walk across the state. I would drive across the state, but there is a loop in which walking makes more sense than driving. Just like there are things that we can use our phones and screens for that are more efficient and effective than if we were doing them manually. But there's also some things that give us a different kind of reward or benefit for doing them the old school way. And one of the things I tell my students all the time is study after study shows that if you take notes by hand with a pencil or a pen and a notebook, you retain more information, you remember it longer, and you can use it better than if you're typing, because there's the tactile sense of writing the words and translating them versus I'm just typing down what my teacher's telling me. And I've got a lot of kids now who are in their classes, they have their laptops up and they're just using a voice to text program to just take down everything the teacher says. But like, but you're not engaging with that material, but you're just passively assuming it. So, and I challenge a lot of my kids, and it's funny, all my STEM majors, they're like, oh, writing by hand, that's the worst. I'm like, yes, it is less efficient, but it is more effective.
Yes.
And that's what we're trying to do here, because it is easy to hide in the infinite doors and hallways of the internet when sometimes we actually need to really put the sweat equity in doing the actual work in the real world.
Sure. Now, I want to take your thought back to an earlier statement, and I want to see if I've interpreted that correctly. I think you were saying that some people are later developing, which might be translated, not yet, may take you 4 or 5 X number of years, but you caregivers, parents, grandparents, be patient, work with them. It's a not yet. Am I misinterpreting any part of that?
No, I mean, there are different developmental pathways here. People are identified as different types of neurodivergent in different areas in their life. Usually the person will be identified when the work gets harder than their brain can handle on their own. So we see a lot of spikes in diagnosis around transitions for elementary school to middle school to high school to college, college to the real world. And so, it's like the famous line about, we didn't see the planet Saturn until 1927. It's not like it wasn't there, right? It's like, no, Saturn has just blinked into existence. No, Saturn was there the whole time. We just didn't see it. So if you have a kiddo who's 21, really struggling their senior year of college when things get really hard, and they end up getting diagnosed with ADHD or dyslexia, they were probably ADHD or dyslexic the whole time, but they were able to compensate in some other ways. And because our brains are fascinating, they're good at problem solving, they're good at rising to the occasion, and they're good at using tools to find ways to get things done, even if those ways are sort of backdoor solutions or atypical ways of solving the problem. So parents and administrators will say to me, well, all of a sudden this kid is ADHD. I'm like, no, this kid has always been ADHD, but it's not been a problem yet, right? And as the demands in our lives change, you're going to feel your neurodivergences more or less, depending on how well suited you are to the environment you find yourself in.
So how can we help the person? I'm thinking of the word transition. The older they get, they're transitioning to more difficult, maybe more diverse topics and so forth, but they're coming up on a topic that, well, this is just too hard. I want to quit. I don't have the tenacity to figure it out, dig into it, and so forth. How do you work with a neurodivergent person who feels they want to give up early?
And that to me is actually one of the biggest problems with the use of technology. And I was actually talking about this with a client earlier today. He's like, I need to be able to watch YouTube to play video games, because how else am I going to beat the video game if I can't watch YouTube? I'm like, dude, do you know how we beat video games back in the day? He goes, no, how do we do it? I was like, we just did it and died a lot until we won the game. And I'm not saying working hard for the sake of working hard is a good idea, but there's value in the grind.
Yes.
In in the resiliency and the grit that comes with just having to do it over and over and over and get a little bit better every single time, versus like I watched some other buddy on the YouTube going, hey man, the secret door is over here and this is how you beat the bad guy, and then I did it. Cool, I've done it, but did I earn it? Right? So the idea is sort of threefold. One is we ask the question, is this a challenge you need for success in your life? A lot neurodivergent people often will take on challenges based on what I like to call secret rules.
Mm-hmm.
Secret rules are like the impossible standards we hold ourselves to but don't tell anybody. I have to be the perfect friend. I have to be the best salesman at work. I have to always have socks that match my belt, right? Whatever these invisible secret rules are. So the first thing is, are we spending a lot of time and energy trying to meet this standard that is impossible and impractical? Because I think that's a key thing. Second thing is, what tools do we have to bring to bear to help solve this problem? I mean, I'm a gifted and ADHD person, which means there's a lot of good things. There's a lot of things about my job that I'm good at. There are also things about my brain that makes my job really hard. So I've hired people to do those things. I have an accountant, I have an attorney, I have an assistant, and I'm telling you, Ron and Marty, giving the whatever percentages of that pie chart to those people has made me better at my job, because I'm spending more time doing the stuff I'm good at and doing only the parts of the things I'm bad at that I have to do. Right? My accountant says, here's a stack of papers. You need to sign these pages of them. I'm like, I paid you a lot of money to set this up for me. I'm assuming you did that right. Sign the thing, send it off. I get my tax refund back. Everybody's happy. Right? It would take me a month to put those papers together and I'd be miserable. Right? So some of this is working smart, not working hard.
Totally agree with you. Now,
Yeah.
I'm very curious that as you took on business and became the person you are, that's a growth journey. You at some point determined, or someone told you that I'm not good at the accounting part of this. I'm not going to take that on to try to learn it. I will bring on someone to do this for me. What I'm trying to build up to is, I guess it's up to us caretakers, parents, grandparents to know that, okay, if whatever that is, this project, let's just call it Legos, a 500-piece Lego set. Oh, that's too big, too hard. Well, do we just take it like 10 pieces at a time, break it down like that? Or do we start out with, well, let's back it off, not the 500 piece, but the 25 piece, and start there and build up to the 500 piece? That's kind of I'm not sure I can word the question in a great way.
Well, you worded it really well, and I'm going to take that idea and I'm going to tweak it just a little bit.
Yep.
Marty, if you don't mind helping me out with this, Marty, what's your favorite thing to do in your spare time?
Oh my goodness. In my spare time, I'm trying to think, when did I have spare time the last time?
Spare time.
Yeah, but I will tell you from my observation, reading is one thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to take, I like to shop. Let's put it that way. My
All right.
time is
Gosh.
shopping.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. If you don't mind, Marty, I'm going to use reading just to get it fits a little bit better to the framework I'm going to use.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the few universal laws in psychology is something called the Yerkes-Dodson law. And what it tells us is that everybody has an optimal level of stress that they learn best at. So if we use reading, I'm going to guess that if I said, Marty, please read, Green Eggs and Ham, if you're not reading it to your grandkids, it's not that exciting. It's not that interesting to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I said, oh, gee, Marty, you like to read, here's Dostoevsky's War and Peace in the original Russian. Do you want to read that?
Nope.
No.
Oh, right. And what life constantly says to our clients is like, but you like to read. Why wouldn't you read Dostoevsky? Well, it's because it's not the right challenge level for Marty, right? So Marty, how do you feel about well, who's your favorite author?
I like authors. I don't think I have a favorite one, but a true story.
Love a true story, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So maybe we have you read some Malcolm Gladwell, like he writes really interesting true stories. Maybe we have you read Bill Bryson. He's a great travel writer. We could find something that we call the leading edge of learning. That's the right thing for you to be engaged at. So Ron, to go back to your thing, the right size Lego set, right? Because if it's too easy, we don't engage with it.
Mhm.
10-piece Lego set, I'm like, that's too easy. Why am I doing this? But if it's too hard, we can't engage with it. And level setting our neurodivergent clients is one of the hardest things that we have to do, because you might have a client who has this capability of being a 30-year IT expert professional, but doesn't have the social skills to get the job interview in the first place.
Yes.
So you need to find a way to not only get that person in the interview, but craft a job that is the right amount of challenge for them to be successful in the field they enter into. And that's why before we even talk about level setting the right number of Legos or the right kind of book for Marty, we're going to start with a very frank and open accounting of what am I good at, what am I okay at, and what do I suck at. And I do that with every single one of my clients, because we're gonna build our best interventions and our paths forward from a very honest telling of what do I do and how well do I do it.
I want to ask, how do you determine what someone is good at? I mean, just like our granddaughter, we were
Right.
trying to determine what is she good at. And I mean, I can tell you some things that she really likes to do, and Lego's one of them. And she will try and tackle a hard one, right?
Well, and I'm going to add to that, we know another aspect of what she's good at. In the context of social skills, she is extremely good, but for maybe 4 or 5 hours. And at the end of that period, she's done.
Yep. So off the top of my head for that, we could set her up as a coach with a one of the Lego competitions for schools is called First Lego League, FLL. And they always need coaches and advisors and mentors, right? Their practices, because they're for young kids, they tend to be about an hour and a half. And she could do that a couple times a week. And then if there's a big competition, knowing she's got that 4-hour time horizon of how much social I can do today, we're going to be strategic in how we're using those 4 hours, right? So if I'm her and the kids are setting up, they don't need my help to set up, I'm going to go sit outside. I'm going to go take the air, right? And then when the actual competition starts, that's when I'm clocking in. It's go time. I've got my 4 hours starts now. And it's the sort of thing where if we give ourselves permission to be intentional and strategic with how we approach everything we do, you're going to think about that the times you're most successful are the times you were strategic in how you use your time and your talent, right? Doing everything is not sustainable for anybody, neurodivergent or neurotypical, right? We host a lot of dinner parties here. I love to cook. I love to entertain. One of the things I'm not very good at is baking. So one simple thing I do is I ask people to bring a dessert. Well, gosh, I can do that, right? I don't have to slave over some cupcakes or muffins. My sister-in-law is going to bring a bundt cake, or my mother-in-law is going to she makes a really good chocolate covered cheesecake. So that means I get to spend more of my energy in doing the stuff I'm good at, and I'm not stressed about this thing that I suck at. It's being strategic, right? And so we could absolutely craft a world that made sense for any neurodivergent person based on their strengths, weaknesses, likes, dislikes, and limitations, right? And what the research shows is that the more we lead with people's interests, the more we play to their strengths, that time horizon, that limit, those limits of functionality expand faster and stay expanded, right? You're going to grow a lot faster and learn more resiliency through doing the things you like and are good at than you are doing things that you dislike and are bad at.
I need to ask you, and my mind is on, has to do with the amount of time doing something, and I'm trying to differentiate, help our listeners differentiate addiction, that's time on, and you can be, in my perception, is addicted to iPad and so forth. There's nothing, to some degree, there could be nothing really gained from that, as opposed to, yes, I'm becoming aware of what you're really good at. I'm collecting, I use the term data points. And
Yeah.
so I want to try to differentiate, well, you just want to get alone and do your own thing because you don't know what else to do. But throughout the day, I need to be just particularly aware to pick up on those data points. I think that's one of the things that I'm trying to collect from you, Dr. Matt.
Yeah. And I'm going to argue that I don't think you can exist in 2024 without being on the internet in some way, right? We're doing this podcast on Zoom, right? We're not in the same place.
Right.
And when I'm done talking to you guys, I'm going to see some clients, none of whom are coming to my home, only one of whom lives in the same state that I do, right? So you can't not be online in 2024. So when parents say to me like, well, my kids shouldn't be on the net, I'm like, go ahead, see how that works out for you, right? I mean, at some point, whether it's emailing someone that you need that job or finding dinner reservations or booking a flight to visit your buddy from college, at some point you need to go online. The idea is, how do we put meaningful limitations around those things? And and so the rule I built for myself during COVID, when I was very apt to do doom scrolling, right? You're just looking, the next bad thing. I set a rule that I could only be on that app for 1 minute for every letter in the title of the thing. So Facebook, 8 minutes, 8 letters in Facebook. CNN, 3 minutes, right? And if you're an OAN person, same thing, 3 minutes, right? Instagram's a huge time suck. Follow the rule, right? And you may not use it perfectly, but even injecting into your brain that there is a limit, there's a back end to the thing you're doing, what it does is it makes your brain start monitoring for that limit. Otherwise, you're just going. And the social media universe is built to be bottomless. It's built to be a black hole. You watch a YouTube video, 6 other ones pop up. You watch that one, 6 other ones pop up, right? The algorithm that runs these accounts is built to keep you engaged. So if you don't intentionally step out of the thing or put a limit around that thing, then the app is going to keep doing what it's designed to do and keep you there. It's like an all-you-can-eat buffet, right? You can keep going up and getting more Jell-O, right? But sooner or later, you're going to pass out or need to call an ambulance, right?
So my mind goes back to one of the very first statements you made in this podcast, structure. We need structure. And so there are rules. And so I think for those of us who are working with neurodivergent people, rules are important, but how do I word this? We need to be tolerant of, and let's say, always collecting the data points, but being aware of what you're good at, but we have to stay structured. So there's, again, the word balance. I go back to that and think that, okay, what is the right balance? And I'm not here to say what it is. We're constantly working on that, it seems.
And I'll tell you, so if you ever figure out what that balance is, you'll be a very rich man, because everyone's looking for that balance. What I have found is that balance is like juggling. There's a rhythm to it, there's a pace to it, but it can very quickly be thrown off, and it's really hard to get back to. So it's important to think of balance not as the default set of things, and things are good if they are balanced, but rather balance as an aspirational goal. Because if we treat it as an aspirational goal, every step we take towards finding balance is a step in a positive direction. Otherwise, it's easy to treat balance as a all or nothing, positive, negative, zero-sum game. I'm either balanced, which is good, or unbalanced, which is bad, right? Even if we're thinking about like the budget, right? And you balance your checkbook, well, a balanced checkbook is fine, but it's also like getting your money under control is a far more complex task than that, right? So let's make space for some nuance and some shades of gray, because what that allows us to do is give more grace, patience, and empathy to the people we serve.
Love what you just said. Let's all learn together, and as we learn together, be willing to exercise the grace and patience, and we learn from each other. Dr. Matt, I'm totally intrigued with these conversations, always learning. My hope is our listeners will always engage and be willing to work with, adapt to, and nurture those neurodivergent people within our circle of influence. Every one of them has talent. Every one of them has something to contribute. It may just take a little bit of patience, if that's the right term. May just take a little bit more time to work things out, but I think in the end, everything is going to work out.
I think so too. And let me throw one more concept at it, because I think this is really helpful. So when you get a job, right? At least in the male version of this, you show up in an interview, you're wearing a suit and tie, you sit there for a while, you talk to the hiring manager. You don't actually really talk about the job you're doing. You talk about like, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Oh, you went to tech? Oh, my cousin went to tech, right? Things that we're talking around the job, but not actually the job. This is a thing that drives neurodivergent people up a wall, because if you're hiring me to debug your router, well, then what does it matter where I went to college? I just want to give me the router so I can debug it, please. So there's a booming job market for neurodivergent affirming jobs and neurodivergent affirming hiring practices. So what we're really talking about before, like working smart, not hard, and using resources, like I hired an assistant. So I have a neurodivergent adult I work with who's been struggling forever to find a job. He finally got set up with one of these neurodivergent centric job things. He's had 8 interviews in the last 2 weeks. And the interviews aren't the shirt and tie, go to the office things. They're product interviews. Hey, we sent you a couple lines of code. Can you fix them? Or, hey, here's a website. How would you make it better? They're product, they're tangible, right? And what this does is this makes his brain so happy, because it allows him to show what he's good at. And they know that if we take someone who's good at a thing, we plug them into that job, they'll be good at the job, which means the floor is really high. But when someone feels competent, they feel confident. When they feel confident, they make more friends and become more social. So they've instead of trying to like jerry rig a way to fix the ladder up to corporate America, they just built an on-ramp. And I'm telling you, I love shouting these programs out, because they've really just made so many of my clients' jobs and lives so much easier. So getting those jobs is now a lot more straightforward than it ever has been.
You have stimulated my thinking, and now I want to ask you, as just as we ended the first episode, would you consider coming back another episode where we can talk about interview skills, how to work with neurodivergent people, and what do I, if I am neurodivergent, do I need to tell you as the interviewer I am neurodivergent, or if you discern that, you adapt to me? And is that the way this process works? I'm sure this is can a topic that could last for hours.
Also,
And
you said there are resources where if I understood right, you can find these jobs. These are jobs that are out there. It's a resource to say this type of job for the person that is looking for a job.
Absolutely right. And they're not all in IT, right? That's the sort of common joke, right? Is that, oh, I'm autistic, I'm going to work in IT. I'm ADHD, so I'm going to be a bartender, right? Like I have a dyslexic client who used one of these neurodivergent affirming job sites to get a job in a marketing agency. And they have support for him around his dyslexia, but he's a wildly creative guy. And he's such a out of the box thinker. I mean, I can't tell you what company he works for because that would violate his confidentiality.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you, like, I've seen the stuff he's worked on and it's really sharp. So, I mean, then this will be a nice teaser for our next episode. We want to create a world in which people feel open to lead with their neurodivergence, right? Neurodivergence can be a hidden disability, right? If I walk into the office and I have a seeing eye dog or I'm in a wheelchair, I can't hide that, right? But you may not know I'm ADHD or dyslexic until the challenge becomes harder than I am capable to do it. But if you create an environment in your company that allows people to show up and say, hey, listen, I'm an ADHDer, I'm going to be great in your marketing direct sales team, you probably don't want me balancing your books, then not only is that more affirming, but it also allows us to be more thoughtful in where we put certain people, right? I'm not going to try to put this ADHDer in accounts receivable if they're telling me, gosh, you know what, that's not a good fit for me, but we do have a spot in outside sales that's wide open, and this guy could sell, boats to Atlantis, right? I mean, like, let's go. And so that goes a long way to, once again, working smarter, not harder.
Totally, I'm on board with you. And I'm going to use the term having an affirming culture is one where we can nurture people and we will develop your talents.
Awesome. I mean, couldn't say better myself.
So you're saying that there's a website that we could go to find out about these different jobs?
Yeah, there's a couple. Probably one of the best broader organizations is the Neurodiversity Employment Network. They're anchored physically out of Philadelphia, though they do a lot of national work. There's a couple companies, Auticon, AUTICON, Aspertech is another one. They're just not only training the employees to be successful, but they're training the employers to meet them in the middle. And, and I get to partner and work with a lot of these organizations because, I mean, the unemployment rate in the autism community is staggering.
Mm-hmm.
And if the goal of working with any person is to give them independence, autonomy, and dignity, a job is one of the best ways we can give somebody independence, autonomy, and dignity, right? And that may mean you're mopping the floors at Burger King. It may mean you're the CEO of a giant multinational corporation, but we have to not only ask the questions of what these people want to do and are capable of doing, but also set up the systems that allow them to reach their potential, because the system is built for neurotypical people, right? I can fake neurotypical very well, right? You put me in an interview, like, listen, like, here's my tie, here's my power suit. Oh, Gary, I saw you on the links last week. What? Like, I guess I didn't know you were a Coke guy because your slice is ridiculous. And he's like, I like the cut of your jib. Let's go have a scotch. And then I'm going to get the job because I can fake it. But if I'm an autistic person who isn't inclined to fake it or doesn't want to fake it, then I might not get that job, even if I'm a better fit for what the actual job entails me to do. Right. And I think that these are conversations that thankfully corporate America is showing increasing amounts of awareness and willingness to engage in these conversations, because not only is it helpful to their bottom line, but I would also argue it's the right thing to do. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Dr. Matt, this is just great, stimulating information. We look forward to the next episode where we will learn how to have that accepting culture, because there are a lot of people that we could and need to bring on to do the work that we need. Thank you so much for, again, we look forward to our next episode.
It's a real pleasure. Great seeing you guys.
We appreciate having the opportunity to share our and our guests' life's experiences with you.
The Cooper Culture advances organizations to achieve and sustain high retention rates, connected communication, and trust through personality insights and principled leadership. You can contact us at our website, thecooperculture.com, and you can contact us directly at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at thecooperculture.com. We work with you to help assess aspects of your culture to advance the environment and people to their best performance. We do that through our staff of certified personal performance coaches, leadership trainers, keynote speakers, and DISC personality behavior experts. You can book a speaking engagement directly through our website by contacting us at ron@thecooperculture.com. We look forward to sharing our life experiences with you, some of which are profound, some of which are pretty funny. Some of those life experiences are ones we'll never do that again because we've been through stuff. We truly look forward to working with you, speaking with you, helping advance you in any way that we can.